The sky over Kelvar Prime burned red with smoke and fire. Explosions echoed across the broken city like thunder that would not stop. Jake Morrison crouched behind a pile of rubble, his rifle held tight against his chest. He was only 24 years old, but the war had already made him feel much older. Dust covered his uniform and his face. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. He had been moving through enemy territory for 2 days without sleep. The radio in his ear crackled with static and voices. His commander was calling everyone back to the main base. The Zarathan forces were pushing forward. They were killing everyone they found. Jake knew he should run. He should follow orders and get to safety, but something made him pause. Ahead of him lay the wreckage of a transport ship. The metal was twisted and black from fire. Bodies lay scattered around it. Jake had seen too many bodies in this war. He started to turn away when he heard it. A small sound. A whimper. Like a child trying not to cry. Jake moved forward carefully. His boots crunched on broken glass. He climbed over a fallen beam and looked inside the transport. There in the corner behind a seat he saw her. A small girl with silver blue skin. Her large violet eyes stared at him with pure terror. She had strange ridges on her head that glowed faintly. Jake had never seen a Valtherian child before, but he knew what she was. The diplomatic convoy. This must be one of their ships. The girl did not move. She did not speak. She just stared at him with those huge eyes. Jake slowly lowered his rifle and held up his empty hands. He spoke softly, the way he used to talk to scared animals back on his family's farm on Earth. "Hey there, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was gentle and calm. The girl did not respond. Jake could see she was in shock. He looked around the transport. All the adults were dead. This child was alone in a war zone. He knew what the Zarathan soldiers did to survivors. They showed no mercy. Jake made a choice. Orders or no orders, he could not leave her here. "I'm going to get you out of here, okay? I promise." He crawled into the transport slowly. The girl pressed herself against the wall. Her head ridges glowed brighter, a sign of fear. Jake stopped moving and just sat there, letting her see he was no threat. After a long moment, Jake reached into his pack. He pulled out a ration bar and held it out to her. The girl looked at the food but did not take it. Jake set it down between them and waited. Finally, the girl reached out with a trembling hand and grabbed the bar. She ate it quickly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Good, that's good." Jake smiled at her. "Now we need to go. Can you walk?" The girl did not answer. She just stared. Jake realized she might not speak his language. Or maybe the trauma had taken her voice. Either way, they needed to move. He could hear weapons fire getting closer. Jake held out his hand. "Come with me. I'll keep you safe." The girl looked at his hand for a long time. Then slowly she reached out and placed her small hand in his. Her skin was cool to the touch. Jake helped her stand. She was tiny, barely reaching his waist. He guessed she was maybe 7 or 8 years old. They climbed out of the wreckage together. Jake looked around quickly. Zarathan patrols were searching the area. He had to find a place to hide. He spotted a collapsed building about 50 meters away. It would have to do. Jake picked up the girl and ran. She was lighter than he expected. She wrapped her thin arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. They made it to the building just as a Zarathan patrol passed by. Jake pressed himself into the shadows, holding the girl close. His heart pounded in his chest. The patrol moved on without seeing them. Jake let out a slow breath. They were safe for now. Jake found a corner in the ruined building where they could rest. He set the girl down and took off his jacket. It was still cool at night on this planet. He wrapped the jacket around her small shoulders. It was way too big for her, but it would keep her warm. The girl pulled the jacket tight around herself. Jake noticed there was blood on her arm. A long cut that needed to be cleaned. "Let me see your arm." Jake reached for her gently. The girl hesitated, but then held out her arm. Jake cleaned the wound with water from his canteen. Then he pulled out a small bar of soap from his pack. It was pine-scented, a reminder of home. He used it to wash the cut carefully, making sure it would not get infected. The girl watched him work with those big violet eyes. When he finished, Jake wrapped the wound with a clean bandage. "There, all better." The girl touched the bandage with her other hand. Then she did something unexpected. She leaned forward and smelled his jacket. Her eyes closed and her head ridges glowed a soft blue color. Jake did not understand what it meant, but he sensed it was important to her. That night, Jake kept watch while the girl slept. She curled up in his jacket like a small animal seeking warmth. Jake watched her sleep and felt a fierce protectiveness rise in his chest. He had found her by chance, but now she was his responsibility. He would get her to safety no matter what. The next 2 days were the longest of Jake's life. He carried the girl when she was too tired to walk. He shared all his food and water with her. He told her stories about Earth to distract her from the sounds of war around them. Stories about forests with tall pine trees. Stories about snow and rivers and peaceful places. The girl never spoke, but she listened. Sometimes her head ridges would glow that soft blue color, and Jake took that as a good sign. On the 3rd day, they finally reached the evacuation zone. Coalition ships were landing to pick up survivors. Jake saw Valtherian diplomats among the rescue workers. He walked toward them with the girl in his arms. When the Valtherians saw her, they rushed forward with relief and concern on their faces. Jake set the girl down gently. One of the diplomats knelt beside her and spoke in their language. The girl did not respond. She just looked back at Jake. The diplomat looked worried. They told Jake she had not spoken since they found her. Jake nodded. He understood trauma. Jake knelt down in front of the girl one last time. You're going to be okay now. These people will take care of you. You're safe. The girl stared at him. Then something changed in her eyes. She reached out and touched his hand. When she spoke, her voice was small but clear. Pine trees and safety. I will remember. The words came out slowly, carefully, like she was making a promise. Jake smiled at her. He thought it was just a child remembering the stories he told. He did not know that for Valtherians, scent memories were perfect and permanent. He did not know that she had memorized everything about him through smell. The pine soap, the way he smelled of earth and kindness and protection. You're going to grow up strong and brave. I know it. Jake stood up. The diplomats led the girl toward the ship. She looked back at him one more time. Her head ridges glowed that soft blue again. Then she was gone. Jake watched the ship take off. Then he picked up his rifle and walked back toward the war. He never expected to see that little girl again. He did not know her name. He did not know she was a princess. He just knew he had saved one small life in a war that had taken so many. That was enough. Years passed. The war ended. Jake left the military and tried to live a quiet life. He never forgot the girl with violet eyes, but he assumed she had forgotten him. After all, she was just a child. Children forget. That was what he told himself. He had no idea how wrong he was. Nexus Station floated in space like a giant wheel of lights. It was the biggest diplomatic hub in the known galaxy. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked here every day. Inside the station was a maze of corridors and chambers, where different species met to talk business and make peace. Today it was busier than usual because of the annual Coalition Summit. Representatives from every member world had come. Jake Morrison walked through the lower market corridor with his hands in his pockets. He was 39 now. His hair had some gray in it. Lines marked the corners of his eyes. He still stood tall but moved with the careful way of someone who had known combat. He worked as a security consultant these days. It was easier than fighting wars. Today he was here with a human trade delegation, making sure their meetings went smoothly. The market was full of noise and smells. Merchants sold food from a dozen worlds. Jake stopped at a small shop that sold soap and toiletries. He picked up a bar of pine-scented soap, the same kind he had used his whole adult life. It reminded him of home, of Earth, of simpler times. He paid for it and tucked it into his bag. Jake did not pay much attention to the summit politics. He had seen enough of diplomacy and war. He preferred the honest work of protecting people who paid him. No grand causes, no heroic speeches, just a job done well. He checked his watch. The delegation had a meeting in an hour. He should head back. Meanwhile, in the upper diplomatic chambers, Princess Lyra Valthera stood before a mirror. She was 22 years old now. Her silver blue skin glowed with health. Her violet eyes were sharp and intelligent. The ridges on her head were more pronounced than when she was a child. Decorated with ceremonial jewelry that marked her royal status, she wore formal diplomatic robes in deep blue and silver. Her aide, Keeper Zinn, adjusted the clasp on her robe. You look perfect, Princess. The council will be pleased with your speech. Lyra smiled but said nothing. She had given many speeches. She was good at diplomacy, but today her mind was elsewhere. It always was when she visited human-populated stations. For 15 years, Lyra had been searching. Not openly, not in a way anyone noticed. But she searched. She remembered the human soldier who saved her. She remembered everything about him. His voice, his kindness, and most importantly, his scent. Pine and earth and something uniquely human. Valtharians never forgot a scent. It was impossible. Her people's memory worked differently than other species. She had tried to find him through military records. But the soldier named Jake Morrison had left the service years ago and disappeared into civilian life. Earth had billions of humans. The colonies had millions more. Finding one man without his cooperation was nearly impossible. Still, she never stopped hoping. Every time she met humans, she paid attention. Every time she walked through a crowd, she breathed deep. Searching for that one familiar scent, "Princess, we should go. The morning session begins soon." Zin's voice brought her back to the present. Lyra nodded. She had duties. She had responsibilities. Her personal quest would have to wait. Again. They walked through the diplomatic levels toward the conference chambers. But Lyra made a request. She wanted to walk through the market corridors instead of taking the direct route. Zin looked surprised but agreed. The princess often made such requests. She said it helped her understand the common people better. Zin did not know the real reason. The market corridor was crowded. Lyra's security team cleared a path through the throng of merchants and shoppers. Lyra walked slowly, taking in the sights and sounds. But mainly the smells. She smelled 100 different species, 1,000 different foods and products. Nothing familiar, nothing that made her heart skip. She felt disappointed but not surprised. It had been 15 years. Maybe he was dead. Maybe she would never find him. Then the climate control system hiccuped. It happened sometimes on stations this old. The air circulation paused for just a moment. The artificial breeze stopped. And in that moment of stillness, the scents in the corridor settled naturally, instead of being pulled away by ventilation. Lyra froze mid-step. Her head ridges flared bright silver. Her eyes went wide. Pine, she smelled pine. Not the chemical fake pine that some cleaners used. Real pine. The exact scent she had memorized 15 years ago, mixed with that specific human chemistry. The scent of safety. The scent of the soldier who had saved her life. Her breath caught in her throat. "Stop!" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. The security team stopped immediately. Zin looked at her with concern. "Princess? What is wrong?" Lyra did not answer. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd. Where was it coming from? The climate system kicked back on and the scent began to dissipate. No. She moved forward, ignoring protocol. Her security team scrambled to keep up. She pushed through the crowd with uncharacteristic urgency. There, ahead of her, a tall human man walking away, brown hair with gray in it, broad shoulders, moving with a soldier's careful stride. He carried a bag from the soap merchant. Lyra's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Could it really be him? After all this time? She opened her mouth to call out but found her voice had left her. 15 years of searching, 15 years of hoping, and now, when the moment came, she could not speak. The man was almost to the corridor exit. She would lose him. Again, the thought spurred her to action. Pine trees and safety. The words came out as a whisper, but in the busy corridor somehow he heard. Maybe he heard because those words had meant something to him once, long ago. The man stopped. He turned slowly, confusion on his weathered face. Jake Morrison saw a young Valtharian woman staring at him. She wore royal robes. Her head ridges glowed so brightly they lit up her face. And she was crying. Tears ran down her silver blue cheeks. He had no idea why, but something about her eyes, those violet eyes. They looked familiar. Then it hit him like a physical blow. The little girl. The child he had saved on Kelvar Prime. But that was impossible. That was 15 years ago. This was a grown woman. A princess, judging by her clothes and the security team surrounding her. Yet those eyes. Those were the same eyes, is it? Are you? Jake could not finish the question. His mind was reeling. The corridor seemed to fade away. All he could see was this woman who was staring at him like he was the most important person in the galaxy. Lyra walked toward him. Her security team tried to stop her, but she waved them back with an impatient gesture. She stopped right in front of Jake. She was taller now, but still had to look up at him. "Jake Morrison." She said his name like it was sacred. "You kept your promise. I did grow up strong." Jake felt his throat tighten. "All those years ago." The little girl in the wreckage. The 3 days of running and hiding. The stories he told her. The pine soap he used to clean her wound. She remembered. She had remembered him all this time. You... His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. You were just a child. I never thought I would see you again. He looked at her, really looked at her. The frightened little girl had become this confident, beautiful woman. Pride swelled in his chest, mixed with something he could not quite name. I have been looking for you. Lyra's voice shook with emotion. For 15 years. I never forgot. My people do not forget scents. And your scent meant safety, meant hope, meant that even in the darkest time there was kindness in the universe. The crowd in the market had stopped to watch. Humans and aliens alike stared at the impossible reunion. A princess and a common soldier. A child saved and a promise kept. Zin stood back with wide eyes, finally understanding why the princess always walked through crowds, always breathed deep, always searched. Jake did not know what to say. He had done what anyone should do. He had saved a child. He never expected thanks. He never expected to be remembered. I just did what was right. The words felt inadequate. That is why it mattered. Lyra reached out and took his hand. Her touch was cool, just as it had been when she was 7 years old. You showed me that doing the right thing is possible. Even in war, even when it is hard, you shaped who I became. And I need to talk to you. Will you come with me, please? Jake looked at this princess who had once been a terrified child in his arms. How could he say no? He nodded. Together they walked out of the market corridor. Behind them the crowd whispered and wondered. News of the reunion spread through the station like wildfire. A human soldier and a Valtherian princess. A story that had begun in war was about to continue in peace. The observation lounge was quiet and private. Large windows looked out at the stars. Jake and Lyra sat across from each other with cups of tea between them. Zin had wanted to stay, but Lyra had asked for privacy. The security team waited outside. For the first time in 15 years, they were alone together. Jake did not know where to start. He looked at Lyra, seeing both the woman she was now and the child she had been. I cannot believe you remembered me. I was just a soldier. You were going through the worst days of your life. Lyra shook her head. Her head ridges glowed soft blue, the color of calm emotions. You do not understand what you did. What those 3 days meant? My parents were dead. Everyone I knew was dead. I was alone and terrified. And then you came. You did not have to stop. You could have left me. I could not leave a child alone in a war zone. Jake's voice was firm. Anyone would have done the same. But they did not. You did. Lyra leaned forward. Do you know what happened after you left me with my people? I did not speak for 6 months. Not a single word. The trauma was too deep. The doctors tried everything, therapy, medicine, nothing worked. I just existed in silence. Jake felt his chest tighten. He had not known. He had assumed she would be fine when she was with her own people. Then one day they gave me pine incense. A human diplomat had brought some to the Valtherian homeworld as a gift. When I smelled it, I spoke for the first time. I said your words. Pine trees and safety. That started my healing. The doctors used scent therapy after that. Every session included that pine smell. It was my anchor, my reminder that kindness exists. Jake did not know what to say. He had never thought about what happened after. He had gone back to war. She had gone back to her world. He assumed that was the end. You must understand something about Valtherians. Lyra continued. Our sense of smell is not like other species. When we experience strong emotions with a scent, we never forget it. Ever. I remember every detail of those 3 days. How you smelled of earth and pine. How gentle your hands were when you cleaned my wound. How your voice sounded when you told me stories. How safe I felt when you held me. Those memories are as clear today as they were 15 years ago. Jake felt uncomfortable with the weight of her words. I just did what I thought was right. I did not mean to become some kind of symbol to you. That is exactly why you are important. Lyra smiled. You saw a child who needed help, and you helped. Not because you wanted glory. Not because you wanted reward. Just because it was right. That is what makes humans special. That is what made me want to dedicate my life to diplomacy, to building understanding between species. She stood and walked to the window looking out at the stars. After I recovered, I learned about human culture. Your history, your philosophies. I learned that humans have a saying. The right thing is often the hard thing. You could have followed your orders and left me. That would have been easier, safer, but you chose the hard thing instead. Jake joined her at the window. I also learned something from you. After I left you, I saw a lot more war, a lot more death. But whenever it got too dark, too hard, I would remember. I saved one. At least I saved one. That kept me going. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Jake asked the question that had been bothering him. Why did you search for me? I am nobody special. Just an old soldier. You are a princess. A diplomat. You could have anyone. Lyra turned to face him. Her violet eyes were serious. Because I wanted to thank you. Because I wanted you to know what you did mattered. Because I wanted to show you that the child you saved became someone who tries to make a difference. But also, she hesitated. Also because I wanted to ask for your help. Jake raised an eyebrow. My help with what? There are hundreds of worlds recovering from the war. Thousands of children like I was. Orphaned, traumatized, lost. The coalition has programs, but they are not enough. They are too formal. Too structured. What those children need is what you gave me. Personal care. Someone who sees them as individuals, not just casualties. She took a breath. I want to create a new initiative. A program that trains people in how to help war-traumatized children. How to connect with them. How to help them heal. And I want you to help me lead it. Jake stared at her. Me? I am not qualified for something like that. I am not a teacher or a therapist. You are exactly what is needed. You have experience. You have compassion. And most importantly, you understand that sometimes the simple act of caring is more powerful than any formal program. You proved that with me. Jake walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. This was not what he expected when he woke up this morning. He had been planning to finish this job and go back to his quiet life. Now a princess was asking him to change the galaxy. Before he could answer, the door to the lounge opened. Commander Lisa Chen entered. She was Jake's old commanding officer from the war, now a coalition liaison. She looked concerned. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. What kind of situation? Lyra asked, immediately switching to her diplomatic voice. Lisa looked at Lyra. Coalition intelligence has picked up chatter. Zirithan extremists, they know you are here, princess. And they know about your reunion with Jake. It is spreading on the news feeds. They see it as propaganda against them, an insult. They are calling you a symbol of their defeat. Jake stood up quickly. His soldier instincts kicked in. Threat level? High. We have identified at least 4 extremists on the station. We are working with station security to find them. But the summit continues tomorrow. Princess, we recommend you leave the station immediately. Lisa's voice was professional but urgent. Lyra shook her head. No, if I run, it sends the wrong message. It says that violence works. That fear wins. I will not do that. Jake looked at her. He saw the determination in her eyes. The same stubborn courage she had shown as a child when she held his hand despite her fear. She is right. Running is not the answer. But we need better security. I can help with that. Lisa looked between them. You two just met again after 15 years and you are already making tactical decisions together. Lyra smiled slightly. Some bonds do not need time to reform. They just exist. She looked at Jake. Will you help keep me safe? One more time? Jake felt that old protective instinct rise up strong and sure. He had saved her once. He would do it again if needed. Always. As they began planning security measures, Jake realized something. His quiet life was over. Whether he had planned it or not, he was being pulled back into something bigger. But looking at Lyra, seeing the woman she had become, he found he did not mind. Some things were worth fighting for. Some promises were worth keeping. Even 15 years later. The next morning, Nexus Station felt different. Security officers were everywhere. They checked identification at every corridor junction. The atmosphere of celebration from the summit had turned tense. Everyone knew something was wrong, even if they did not know exactly what. Jake stood in the security command center with Lisa and Station Security Chief Martinez. Screens showed every angle of the diplomatic chambers. They had enhanced security protocols and increased patrols. But Jake knew from experience that determined enemies always found ways through. We have identified 3 of the 4 suspects. Martinez pointed to photos on the screen. 2 are posing as maintenance workers. 1 is disguised as a food service employee. We are watching them, but have not moved yet. We want to catch all four. Jake studied the faces. They all had that look. The 1,000-yard stare. The tight jaw. The eyes that had seen too much death. These were not random extremists. They were trained soldiers, veterans. That made them much more dangerous. What about the fourth one? Jake asked. Unknown. We know there are 4 based on intercepted communications, but we cannot identify the last one. Lisa frowned. That worries me the most. Unknown threats are the deadliest. Meanwhile, Lyra was in her quarters with Zin. She was supposed to be preparing her speech for the closing ceremony, but she could not focus. She kept thinking about the threat, about how violence never truly ended, about how the war still reached forward to touch the present. You should cancel your appearance, Zin said quietly. Your safety is more important than any speech. Lyra shook her head. If I hide every time someone threatens me, I am not much of a leader. Besides, what message does that send? That terrorism works? That we should all live in fear? Her head ridges glowed orange, the color of determination. The princess is right. Jake's voice came from the doorway. He had entered so quietly that Zin jumped. But that does not mean we take stupid risks. We go to the ceremony, but we do it smart. Lyra smiled at him. You move very quietly for someone your size. Old habits. Jake walked into the room. I have been reviewing the ceremony layout. There are too many access points. Too many places someone could hide. We need to change your route and timing. They spent the next hour going over every detail. Jake saw security the way a soldier saw a battlefield. He identified weak points that the regular security team had missed. Lyra watched him work and saw the warrior he had once been. It was strange seeing this side of the kind man who had told her stories about earth forests. That evening, there was a diplomatic reception before the closing ceremony. Lyra had to attend. It would look suspicious if she did not. Jake went with her, dressed in formal security attire. He stayed close but not obviously so. His eyes constantly scanned the crowd. The reception hall was filled with delegates from dozens of worlds. Music played. People talked and laughed. It seemed peaceful, but Jake felt the tension underneath. He noticed how some delegates kept glancing at Lyra, how the station security officers were positioned at every exit, how the air felt charged with possibility. Then Jake saw something that made his blood run cold, a server moving through the crowd with a tray of drinks. The man moved efficiently, professionally, but there was something wrong. His footwork. It was too precise, too military. Jake had seen that movement pattern before in combat veterans. Jake moved closer, keeping his body language casual. As the server passed, Jake caught a glimpse under the man's sleeve. A tattoo, the symbol of a Zarathan elite unit. Jake touched his comm device. Lisa, I have the fourth one. Server with the drink tray. Northeast corner. Security moved in smoothly. They surrounded the server before he realized what was happening. The man tried to run but was tackled to the ground. Other guests gasped and moved back. In the confusion, something fell from the server's pocket. A small device. Jake recognized it. A remote trigger. Bomb. Jake shouted. Security immediately began evacuating the hall. Jake ran to Lyra and grabbed her arm. We need to go, now. He pulled her toward the nearest exit. Zin and the security team followed. They made it to the corridor when the explosion hit. Not a big one. Just enough to cause panic and chaos. The bomb had been in the reception hall's air circulation system. Smoke poured out. Alarms blared. People ran in every direction. Jake pushed Lyra against the wall, using his body to shield her. His training took over completely. He scanned for threats while keeping her protected. Are you hurt? No, I am fine. Lyra's voice was steady despite the chaos. Her head ridges glowed bright white, a color Jake had not seen before. Later he would learn it meant fear being controlled by willpower. Station security locked down the area. They rounded up the other 3 suspects quickly. Within minutes, the immediate threat was over. But the message had been sent. The Zarathan extremists wanted everyone to know they could strike anywhere. That old hatreds were not forgotten. Later, in a secure room, Jake and Lyra sat together while security debriefed them. Lyra's diplomatic composure had returned, but Jake could see the strain in her eyes. She had faced her parents' murderers' ideological descendants. That could not be easy. You saved me again, Lyra said quietly when they were finally alone. I just spotted the threat, Security did the rest. Jake was uncomfortable with praise. It had always been that way. You saw what others missed. That is a gift. Lyra reached into her robe and pulled out something small, a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. This is a Valtharian Guardian token. We give it to those we trust with our lives. Family, closest friends, those who stand between us and darkness. She pressed it into Jake's hand. You were my guardian when I was a child. You are my guardian now. Not because of duty, not because of orders, but because you choose to be. That means everything. Jake looked at the crystal. It was warm in his palm, pulsing gently with light. He did not know what to say. So he just closed his hand around it and nodded. Some things did not need words. The summit continues tomorrow, Lyra said. The closing ceremony. Will you stand with me? Not as my security, but as my friend. As the person who showed me that hope survives even in the darkest times. Jake smiled. It was a real smile, not the careful expression he usually wore. I would be honored. That night, Jake could not sleep. He sat in his quarters holding the Guardian token. Its light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. 15 years ago, he had saved a child. He thought that was the end of the story, but now he understood. It was never the end. It was just the beginning. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage ripples forward through time. He had thrown a stone into a pond 15 years ago. The ripples had finally come back to him. Tomorrow would bring the closing ceremony. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But tonight, Jake felt something he had not felt in years. He felt like he belonged to something larger than himself. He felt like his life had purpose again. All because he had once chosen to save a frightened child in a war zone. All because a promise made in darkness had been kept in light. The grand ceremony hall was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. The closing ceremony of the Coalition Summit was always a major event. But today it meant more. Yesterday's attack had shaken everyone. The fact that the ceremony was happening at all was a statement. Fear would not win. Violence would not silence them. Jake stood backstage with Lyra. She wore formal robes in silver and deep blue, the colors of Valtharian royalty. Her head ridges were decorated with ceremonial crystals that caught the light. She looked every inch a princess. But Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. She was nervous. You are going to be great, Jake said quietly. Just speak from your heart. That is what you do best, Lyra smiled at him. Will you be watching? Every second. Jake squeezed her hand briefly. Then she walked out onto the stage. The audience applauded. Jake watched from the wings. He had a clear view of both the stage and the audience. Old habits, always watching for threats. Lyra stood at the podium. She looked out at the thousands of faces. Then she began to speak. Yesterday, someone tried to silence me with violence. They failed. Not because of better security. Not because they were caught. But because their fundamental belief is wrong. They believe that fear is stronger than hope. They believe that hatred outlasts compassion. They believe that violence is the final word. But they are mistaken. Her voice grew stronger. 15 years ago, I was a child in a war zone. My parents were dead. Everyone I knew was gone. I was alone and terrified. And then a human soldier found me. He did not have to stop. He had orders to regroup. Staying with me put him in danger, but he chose to help me anyway. He carried me to safety. He shared his food. He cleaned my wounds. He told me stories. He showed me that even in the darkest moment, kindness exists. Jake felt his face grow warm. She was talking about him. To thousands of people. He had not expected this. That soldier taught me something important. He taught me that doing the right thing is a choice we make every day. Not because it is easy, not because we will be rewarded, but because it is right. That lesson shaped who I became. It shaped my entire life. And yesterday, 15 years later, he saved me again. Not because he had to, but because when you make the choice to care about others, you keep making it, again and again. Lyra gestured toward the wings. Jake Morrison, will you join me, please? Jake froze. This was not part of the plan. But Lyra was looking at him with those violet eyes, the same eyes that had looked at him with trust 15 years ago. He could not refuse. He walked out onto the stage. The audience applauded louder. Lyra turned to face him. This man represents what the coalition should stand for. Not military might, not political power, but the simple choice to help those who need it, to stand against darkness with small acts of light. To remember that every individual life has value, she addressed the audience again. I propose a new coalition initiative, a program to help children traumatized by war. Not just medical help or therapy, though those are important, but personal connection, training people to reach out with compassion, to see each child as an individual, to give them what Jake gave me. Hope. The audience erupted in applause. Delegates from dozens of worlds stood. The response was overwhelming. Jake stood there uncomfortable with the attention but understanding what Lyra had done. She had turned a personal story into a call to action. She had taken the violence of yesterday and transformed it into purpose for tomorrow. After the ceremony, delegates swarmed Lyra with support for the initiative. Multiple worlds pledged funding. Human representatives offered resources. Even some former Zarathan territories expressed interest. The attack that was meant to spread fear had instead inspired unity. That evening, Jake and Lyra finally had a moment alone. They stood in the same observation lounge where they had talked before. The stars outside seemed brighter somehow. You ambushed me out there, Jake said, but he was smiling. I needed you to see what I see. You are not just some old soldier. You are someone who changes lives, who makes the galaxy better by existing in it. Lyra's head ridges glowed that peaceful blue.
So will you help me with this initiative?
Will you teach others how to care the way you cared for me? Jake thought about his quiet life, his simple job, the peace he had found after war. Then he thought about all the children out there who needed someone to tell them stories about pine trees and safety, who needed someone to wrap them in a jacket and promise them a future. Yes, I will help. The words felt right, like a path he was meant to walk. But only if you promise me something. Anything, Lyra said. Stop calling me a hero. I am just a man who made a choice. The same choice anyone should make. Let us teach that. Not that some people are heroes, but that all people can choose to help. Lyra laughed. It was a genuine sound full of joy. Deal. But I reserve the right to think you are a hero even if I do not say it out loud. They shook hands. But then Lyra did something unexpected. She stepped forward and hugged him. A proper hug like family. Jake froze for a moment, then hugged her back. She was not the small, frightened child he remembered. She was strong and brave and capable. But in that moment, he felt that same protective instinct. Some bonds never broke. They just grew stronger with time. 6 months later, Jake and Lyra stood together on Kelvar Prime. The planet was recovering. New buildings rose where rubble had been. Children played in new parks. It was still scarred by war, but healing. They walked to the memorial built where Lyra's family had died, where Jake had found her all those years ago. Lyra placed flowers at the memorial. It was a human custom she had adopted. Jake watched her, seeing both the child she was and the woman she had become. Lyra pulled out a small burner and lit pine incense. The smell drifted on the wind. Pine trees and safety. It still means that to me. It always will. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. And you did grow up strong and brave, just like I promised. We both kept our promises. Lyra smiled at him. You promised I would have a future. I promised I would remember. And now we are building futures for others. Together. They stood in silence for a while. Then they walked away from the memorial together. Their work was just beginning. There were hundreds of worlds recovering from war. Thousands of children who needed hope. It was a huge task. But they would face it together. A princess and a soldier. A child saved and a promise kept. Two people who proved that the smallest acts of kindness could change the entire galaxy. Behind them, the pine incense smoke drifted upward toward the sky. It carried memories of darkness and light, of fear and safety, of war and peace, and of the simple truth that sometimes one person choosing to care is all it takes to change a life, to change a world, to change everything. The story that began in fire and smoke and terror had become a story of hope. And that hope would spread, carried forward by every child they helped, every person they taught, every life they touched. The ripples from that one moment 15 years ago would never stop spreading, because that is how compassion works. It grows, it multiplies, it transforms. Jake Morrison had once thought his greatest achievement was surviving the war. Now he knew better. His greatest achievement was stopping in the middle of that war to save one small life. Everything good that came after flowed from that single choice. The choice to see a child who needed help and to help her. The choice that proved humans belonged among the stars not because they were strong or smart or advanced, but because they knew how to care. And somewhere in the galaxy, another child needed help. Another person faced darkness. But now there would be someone there to offer light. Someone trained by Jake and Lyra. Someone who understood that the right thing to do is often the hard thing. Someone who would make that choice anyway. Because that is what it means to be part of something larger than yourself. That is what it means to build a better future. One small act of kindness at a time.